Hey everybody, my name is Carly Watson. I'm the Director of Debate at Michigan State University, and I'm also the Director of the Spartan Debate Institute, which is a youth program that MSU hosts. It's a debate camp that we host every summer. And just as some background about where we kind of were with online debate, in the summer of 2019, so not last summer, but the summer before, we had started to play around with the idea of potentially having some of our debate instruction and debate competition for the camp occur online. And part of that was because, we were thinking about expanding the length of the camp to be from not just 4 weeks to be 6 weeks. And we were thinking, what is the content that we're really adding over that time? And is there a way to have the time that students spend residentially at the camp be the same, still be 4 weeks, but to receive 6 weeks of content? And so we started playing around with, what does an online debate look like? What are some online platforms that we can use for instruction? And our original plan for the summer of 2020 was to have students spend 2 weeks receiving instruction online and then 4 weeks receiving instruction on campus. And the promise that we saw in online programming were some things around program design. Honestly, we wanted to kind of rethink the way that we delivered content over the time that students were at the camp. Does it make sense to have a 90-minute lecture where students have to walk across campus to watch someone talk at them? Or could that be condensed into, a 20-minute pre-recorded lecture that they do on their own time? Some of it had to do with accessibility, especially around cost, without having to pay for room and board for the 2 weeks that they would be on campus, without having to pay for travel costs. We thought that there would be some benefits around accessibility. And then also just like flexibility and logistics. It would be easier for students to fit in with their schedules if they were, participating remotely. And just some logistics stuff from our end, which is like, do you have to supervise youth from, 24 hours a day for 6 weeks as opposed to 4 weeks, and whether or not there was a way to kind of meet in the middle. And in the wake of COVID-19, we obviously transitioned all of our summer 2020 programming to be entirely online. And I think we were in a little bit better spot to make that decision just because we had really thought about what that would look like in previous summers. And so we were the first camp to move entirely online in the summer of 2020. But, thinking about it at the semester break, it had just, fast forwarded everyone's experience with online debate so much. And so we wanted, as a program at MSU, to look at some of the data behind people's experiences with online debate. And so we set up a survey to kind of add some statistics to what we were talking about, not just the loudest voice in support of online debate or the loudest voice against online debate, but really like what were, if you looked at the aggregate, the experiences that people were having with online debate. So we set up a survey using MSU's survey platform called Qualtrics, and we distributed a survey over the course of a week. And we had about 200 respondents, and their affiliations were primarily with policy debate, although we didn't limit it to any type of debate. But about 80% of the people who responded were primarily affiliated with policy debate. And, just looking at our sample size, our respondents skewed younger. I don't think that's super surprising given the demographic of high school and college debaters that are they obviously outnumber the number of coaches who are a little bit older. So about 80% of our respondents were 34 years old or younger. And so I think that's important. I think it shows that we had a lot of response from current participants, but it would be interesting in the future to kind of disaggregate current participants from coaches or program directors to look at, differences in experience based on that. And then the other thing to note kind of from our sample was just like what racial diversity looked like. There was some, but respondents who reported their race as Black were only 4% of the respondents in our survey. And that definitely suggests an undersampling relative to the general population. And I'm not sure if that really is an undersampling relative to the debate population, but I think it's important to kind of think about, when we think about talking about things in aggregate, if they do maybe have disproportionate effects on, different races, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ages, all of that is important and something I think we could look at more. So the survey looked at people's experiences with online debate before COVID-19, during COVID-19, and then asked some opinions about what tournaments should look like after COVID-19 restrictions on travel or gathering are lifted. And so we did ask people if they had previous experience with online debate before COVID-19 and what that experience kind of looked like and what they felt about it. But we didn't really spend a lot of time analyzing that data just because so few of the respondents had experience with online debate. And so we spent the vast majority of time looking at, what is their current experience in COVID-19 times with online debate and what do they think it should look like after. And so what we saw was a very strong support for the value of online debate based on kind of asking, do you see a value in online debate? Almost 90%, like 88% of respondents said that they strongly agreed or agreed with the statement that online debate competitions were valuable for the debate community. And so when you think about trying to get consensus around an issue, that's actually, it's pretty significant to think about, that there is sort of a strong support for the value of online debate. And the support really tracked with a lot of the things and a lot of the promise that we had seen with the potential for online debate when we were originally conceiving of the SDI's online section. So 84% of survey respondents strongly agreed or agreed that it was important for geographically isolated schools. And about 81% agreed or strongly agreed that it was important for schools with lower budgets. And so I think that kind of tracks with what we were seeing too, which is reducing some of the cost barriers associated with travel or participation, and thinking that there was some benefits there for online debate. The largest concern with online debate that was that the survey respondents selected was loss of community. So 83% of respondents said they agreed or strongly agreed that online debate competitions damage the community aspects of debate. And so I think looking forward, and I'll talk a little bit more about what debate might look like in the future, but if there are online components, it's important to kind of think about how can we maybe bring some of those community aspects back to online debate or make sure that they're included in a deliberate sense. We also asked some questions from survey respondents about the idea of access. So we asked respondents, do you agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, et cetera, that online debate competitions increase access? And about 75% of respondents said that they did. And I think that kind of tracks with a lot of the cost benefits that people see, which is if you reduce the cost of participation in online competitions or in online instruction, that would increase access. We also asked the question, do you think that online debate benefits urban debate league schools, which is sort of interesting. And it was obviously a population not just of NAUDL students or NAUDL coaches, but it was a broader sampling. So it'd be interesting to ask that question of just NAUDL students or NAUDL coaches, although they were represented in the sample. And 50% of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that online debate competitions were important for urban debate league schools. So about half, but only 10% strongly disagreed or somewhat disagreed. A lot had, moderate opinions, neither agree nor disagree. And so I think that's something that's kind of interesting to think about, which is, does online debate increase access by reducing cost? But if it's not beneficial to increasing access, necessarily for urban debate league schools, is there a way to have that benefit be accessed by UDL schools, or is it not the perfect answer for all leagues or all formats? I think that would be something interesting to kind of think about. And so in addition to just thinking about what are the pros and cons that people see in current online debate, we also asked, what after COVID-19 restrictions on travel or gatherings are listed, what should debate tournaments look like? Should all large tournaments, national tournaments, be hosted online? Should all regional tournaments be hosted online, but you travel to large national competitions? Should there be a mix between them? Should we just abandon online debate altogether? Should we abandon in-person debate? And so the survey respondents generally had support for continuing some element of online debate after travel and gathering restrictions are lifted after COVID-19. So Very few supported the statement online debate competitions should be eliminated, and relatively large percentages said, and certainly majorities said, that online debate competition should be continued. The problem was in trying to find out like what people thought that would look like. And so there wasn't very much support for using online tournaments, just either for regional tournaments or larger tournaments. The biggest consensus, to the extent that there was some in the survey over what the mix of tournaments should look like going forward, is that there kind of should just be a mix. There should be some national tournaments that are hosted online. There should be some regional tournaments that are hosted online, and to really allow students the opportunity to, and programs, the opportunity to choose what types of tournaments they include in a semester or in a year of competition. The other questions that we asked about were about hybrid models. So that's come to mean the idea that either like the judges could be at home and the participants could be in person, or maybe like one team participates remotely, but judges and the other team are in person and physically travel to a tournament. And there's definitely some support for that amongst participants, but I think that's a much larger conversation. We didn't ask whether or not those should be separate divisions, like if you should have an online division and an in-person division, or if they should be mixed, or what that would kind of look like. And so I think one of the initial concerns when tournaments were moving online was whether or not those hybrid models would create problems with just sort of like competitive equity. That's like, is the experience the same? Can a judge one team that's there and one team that's remote? Is it fair to ask a team to travel to then debate a team that's online? And just kind of thinking through some of that stuff, I think that's a much larger conversation. And we didn't ask a lot of questions specific to it. But to the extent that there was a consensus about what tournaments and what the season should look like going forward, there was generally support for having a mix of in-person and online tournaments, and a mix of types of tournaments that were online, regional, local, and national. And so it doesn't totally answer the question of where we go from here. That was not really the point of creating a survey, but I do think it gives us some interesting ideas to think about when we plan for the future. And I think one thing that I would encourage people to do is to do a little bit of like big picture thinking about, you know, what should the design of a season look like? And not just from the perspective of personal preference, but from the perspective of, you know, what would be best for the debate community. If you're from a school that is geographically isolated and you see a ton of benefit in online debate, you know, is that something that we should value and we should think about when we kind of plan for a season? And I think the answer might be yes, especially when we think about expanding, you know, access to debate. But I don't know that that means that we have to move entirely online. Certainly there are downsides identified in the survey, community, and all of that need to be kind of factored in. But I think there does need to be more recognition, certainly, that there are a diversity of experiences with debate, and that maybe there is a way for a mix of tournaments online and in person to capture more experiences and more, you know, backgrounds that people have with debate in a way that increases their access. But the survey wasn't meant to be the end of the discussion. It was meant to be just sort of a piece of the discussion. Like I mentioned, as I was kind of talking, there are absolutely spaces for additional research, additional surveys, additional analysis of this data. And so I think that's one thing that is honestly kind of exciting. I mean, it's a scary time because we don't really know what turning debate back on will look like, but it's also an opportunity to kind of plan for the future, knowing a little bit more about online debate than we did 2 years ago. And I think one other important thing, and we asked a question about this in the survey, but didn't spend a lot of time analyzing it and didn't ask a lot of detailed questions about it, was just about budget uncertainty. And I think there's a lot of programs that are, I don't know, fearful is the word, but definitely worried about the future of their schools' budgets for travel, for participation in debate in a post-COVID world, just because of, you know, all kinds of economic uncertainty for families, for businesses, for schools, because of the pandemic. And so I think we're seeing some additional support for online options, at least in the short term, in order to provide opportunities for those schools that may have previously not been as concerned about the budget, but are now more concerned to have opportunities to continue to debate. And I think that the survey also teaches us a lot about what online debate can look like if it is kind of a piece of what we're going to do moving forward. Trying to create additional resources, attention dedicated to addressing hardware gaps, like not having sufficient internet, or having a more deliberate focus on preserving community, which I think is something that people have really identified as a downside to online debate. And then also just more exploration of what a hybrid model might look like. Is there an opportunity for students who really, in programs who really miss the in-person aspects of debate, to be able to do that while someone else competes remotely because they're geographically isolated or maybe don't have the budget to be able to travel? And what kind of could or would that look like going forward? I don't think we have enough experience with that to really maybe know the answer, but it would be interesting to kind of experiment or look at going forward. And so that's just a little bit about kind of where we were coming from, why we did the survey, and the results that we found. But I'm happy to answer any questions. You can always email me at debate@msu.edu. And our website also has a complete set of the data if you're interested in kind of deep diving on that too. So I appreciate your time, and thank you.